Katie Moore wiped the sweat from her forehead as she crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel. The metal walls pressed close around her small frame, but she didn't mind tight spaces. At 19, she had been working on Orbital Trading Station, Nexus 7, for almost 2 years. The cramped tunnels felt like home now. Her tool bag scraped against the tunnel floor as she moved toward the next junction box. The station hummed with activity above her, but down here in the belly of the massive structure, everything was quiet except for the steady thrum of the life support systems. Katie liked it that way. She could think better without all the noise and chaos of the main corridors. The station was huge, bigger than most cities back on Earth. It hung in space like a giant wheel, spinning slowly to create artificial gravity. Dozens of different alien species came here to trade goods and make deals. The humans were still new to this galactic community. Most aliens looked down on them as weak and primitive. Katie opened her tool bag and pulled out a small scanner. The junction box showed green lights, which meant everything was working fine. She made a note on her tablet and moved on to the next one. Her supervisor, Greg Palmer, had given her a long list of systems to check before the big trade meeting started tomorrow. The Corvani delegation had arrived yesterday and everyone on the station was nervous. The Corvani were known for being aggressive and quick to anger. They looked like giant insects with hard shells covering their bodies and claws instead of hands. They stood nearly 8 feet tall and were incredibly strong. Most species feared them. Katie finished checking the last junction box in this section and started crawling back toward the main access hatch. Her tool bag felt heavier now, loaded with spare parts and equipment. She had found 3 minor problems and fixed them all. Greg would be happy with her work. The access hatch opened into one of the station's main corridors. Katie climbed out and stood up, stretching her back. The corridor was busier than usual, filled with aliens of all shapes and sizes. She recognized most of the species by now. The tall, thin Zelathi with their blue skin and large eyes. The furry Moxari who looked almost like Earth bears but walked on 2 legs. The reptilian Sectar with their scales and forked tongues. Katie shouldered her tool bag and started walking toward the maintenance office. She needed to report her findings to Greg and pick up her next assignment. The corridor was crowded and she had to squeeze between groups of aliens conducting business. A group of Corvani stood near the central lift area, talking in their harsh, clicking language. Katie had learned to recognize the sound over the past few days. Their translator devices converted their words into basic galactic standard, but their natural speech sounded like metal scraping against stone. She tried to walk around them, but the corridor was too crowded. Katie would have to pass close to the group. She kept her head down and moved carefully, not wanting to attract attention. The Corvani were known for their bad tempers, and humans were easy targets for their aggression. One of the Corvani, bigger than the others, was gesturing angrily with his clawed hands. His name was Vextar, according to the station roster Katie had seen. He was some kind of important trade official, the kind who thought he was better than everyone else. Vextar's voice carried over the crowd noise. "These humans are incompetent," he was saying. "How can they expect to participate in serious negotiations when they cannot even maintain their own technology properly?" Katie felt her cheeks burn with anger, but she kept walking. She had heard comments like this before. Many aliens thought humans were too weak and stupid to be taken seriously. They forgot that humans had built this station and maintained all its complex systems. The crowd pressed closer together as more aliens gathered to listen to Vextar's complaints. Katie found herself pushed toward the Corvani group. Her tool bag bumped against other beings as she tried to find a path through. The human engineers claimed they fixed the atmospheric processors yesterday. Vextar continued, his voice getting louder. "Today we found 3 more failures in the guest quarters. How can we trust a species that cannot perform simple maintenance tasks?" Katie stopped walking. She knew exactly what Vextar was talking about. The atmospheric processors in the guesty quarters had been acting up for weeks. The problem wasn't with human maintenance, it was with the Corvani themselves. They kept adjusting the environmental controls in their rooms, overriding the automatic systems and causing failures. Greg had explained this to the Corvani engineers 3 times, but they refused to listen. They insisted their way was better, even though it kept breaking the equipment. Now Vextar was blaming the humans for problems his own people had caused. The corridor became even more crowded as aliens stopped to listen to the argument. Katie felt herself being pushed forward by the press of bodies behind her. She tried to step sideways, but there was nowhere to go. Her tool bag caught on something and jerked hard against her shoulder. Katie stumbled forward, her hands shooting out to catch her balance. The bag swung around and knocked against Vextar's. It's like the big Corvani spun around, his dark eyes focusing on Katie. She looked tiny next to his massive frame. Her tool bag had left a small mark on his polished shell armor. "Watch where you are going, human," Vextar snarled. His translator device made his words sound cold and mechanical. "Sorry," Katie said quickly. "The corridor is really crowded. I didn't mean to bump into you." She started to move away, but Vextar wasn't finished. He looked down at the mark on his armor, then back at Katie with obvious disgust. "This is exactly what I was talking about," he announced to the crowd. "Humans have no awareness of their surroundings. They stumble around like blind creatures, causing problems wherever they go." Katie felt her face getting hot again. She wanted to tell him that she had been trying to avoid his group, that the crowd had pushed her forward. She wanted to explain about the atmospheric processors and how his own people had caused those failures. But she knew better than to argue, with a Corvani official in front of so many witnesses. "I said I was sorry," she repeated, keeping her voice steady. "It was an accident." Vextar stepped closer, using his height to tower over her. Other Corvani moved to flank him, making Katie feel even smaller. The crowd of aliens pressed in around them, sensing drama. "Your apology means nothing," Vextar said. "You humans think you can simply say sorry and fix everything. But your incompetence affects all of us. Your poor maintenance work, your careless behavior, your weakness." Katie's hands tightened on her tool bag straps. She had been working double shifts for weeks, fixing problems all over the station. She and the other human engineers kept this place running while aliens like Vextar complained about everything. "I work hard to keep the station functioning," she said quietly. "We all do." Vextar laughed, a harsh sound that his translator turned into something like grinding metal. "Work hard? You call this working hard? A real engineer would not have these constant system failures. A competent species would not send children to do important jobs." The crowd murmured agreement. Most of the aliens seemed to enjoy watching. The human being put in her place. Katie realized that this wasn't really about her bumping into Vextar. This was about humans in general, and their place in galactic society. She took a deep breath and looked up at the towering Corvani. Tomorrow's trade negotiations would determine whether humans got better access to alien technology and markets. Vextar was trying to undermine human credibility before the talks even started. Katie Moore was just a maintenance worker, but she was also human. And humans, she had learned, were much more dangerous than they appeared. The crowd around them grew larger as more aliens stopped to watch the confrontation. Katie could feel dozens of eyes staring at her, waiting to see what would happen next. The corridor had become so quiet that she could hear the hum of the station's air recycling system. Vextar took another step closer, his massive frame blocking out the overhead lights. His chitinous armor gleamed under the artificial illumination, and Katie could see her own reflection distorted in its polished surface. The other Corvani flanked him like bodyguards, their claws clicking softly against the metal deck plates. "You humans are all the same," Vextar continued, his voice growing louder. "You make excuses for your failures. You blame others for your mistakes. You apologize but never learn." Katie shifted her weight, adjusting the heavy tool bag on her shoulder. The metal tools inside clinked together softly. She could feel her heart beating faster, but she kept her expression calm. Years of dealing with difficult situations in the maintenance tunnels had taught her to stay cool under pressure. "I told you it was an accident," she said again. "The corridor is crowded and I got pushed forward." "Pushed forward," Vextar repeated mockingly. "Always something else's fault. Never your responsibility." A Zalathi in the crowd made a sound that might have been laughter. Several Moxari nodded their furry heads in agreement. Katie realized that many of the aliens were enjoying this public humiliation of a human. It confirmed what they already believed about her species. "The trade negotiations begin tomorrow," Vextar announced to the crowd. and the humans expect to be treated as equals. They want access to our technology, our markets, our knowledge. But look at this pathetic example. This is what humans are really like. Katie felt anger building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. Getting emotional would only prove Vextar's point about human weakness. She had to be smarter than that. "I'm just a maintenance worker," she said quietly. "I'm not part of the trade negotiations." "Exactly." Vexatar slammed one clawed hand against the wall, creating a loud bang that echoed through the corridor. "You are just a maintenance worker, and yet your people cannot even do maintenance properly. How can they handle complex trade agreements?" Katie's jaw tightened. She thought about all the hours she had spent crawling through cramped tunnels, fixing problems that kept the station running smoothly. She thought about the atmospheric processors that the Corvani themselves had damaged through their own stubbornness. She thought about the 100 other systems she maintained that these aliens took for granted. "We keep this station working," she said, her voice steady but firm. "Every system, every life support function, every piece of equipment that lets you live and breathe in space. Humans built this place and humans maintain it." The crowd stirred uneasily. Some aliens looked uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. Others seemed more interested than before, sensing that the small human might actually fight back. Vextar's eyes narrowed to dark slits. "You dare lecture me about engineering? My people were building starships when yours. We're still living in caves. We have technology your primitive minds cannot even comprehend." "Then why do you need our trade agreements?" Katie asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vextar's mandibles clicked together rapidly, a sign of agitation that Katie had learned to recognize. The other Corvani moved closer, forming a tighter circle around her. "You insolent little creature," Vextar hissed. "You forget your place." "My place is keeping this station operational," Katie replied, "which is exactly what I was doing when you decided to make this into a public spectacle." She could see Jake Collins pushing through the crowd behind Vextar. Jake was a security officer, 24 years old and built like a boxer. He had been looking out for Katie ever since she started working on the station. His face was grim, as he tried to reach them through the press of alien bodies. But Jake was still too far away to help, and Katie was on her own. She looked up at Vextar, who was clearly working himself into a rage. His breathing had become louder, and his claws were extending and retracting in a threatening display. "Your place," Vextar said slowly, "is to show proper respect to your betters. Your place is to acknowledge that humans are the youngest and weakest species in this galaxy." He reached out with one massive claw and poked Katie hard in the shoulder. The gesture was meant to emphasize his point, but it pushed her back a step. Her tool bag swung against her hip and she had to grab the strap to keep it from falling. "Your place," Vextar continued, poking her again, "is to accept that you are inferior in every way that matters." Katie looked around at the crowd of aliens, watching the confrontation. She could see the satisfaction in their faces as they watched the human being put down. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about her entire species and their reputation in the galactic community. "I understand what you're trying to do," she said quietly. "You want to make humans look weak before the trade talks begin. You want everyone to see us as easy targets." Vexatar's mandibles spread wide in what passed for a smile among his kind. "I do not have to make you look weak. You are weak. All humans are weak." "Maybe we are," Katie said. "We're smaller than most species. We don't have claws or armor or natural weapons. We can't breathe different atmospheres or survive in extreme temperatures without help." The crowd murmured agreement. This was exactly what they expected to hear from a human, an admission of inferiority. "But you know what we do have?" Katie continued, her voice getting stronger. "We have something that makes us more dangerous than any of you realize." Vextar leaned down until his face was only inches from hers. "And what is that, little human?" "We remember everything," Katie said simply. "Every insult, every threat, every time someone tries to hurt us, and we plan accordingly." For a moment, something flickered in Vextar's eyes. It might have been uncertainty, or even a hint of caution. But it was gone quickly. replaced by anger at being challenged by such a small creature. "You threaten me," he snarled. "You think your words frighten me?" "I'm not threatening anyone," Katie said. "I'm just explaining how humans work. We don't react with anger like you do. We think first, then we act." Vexitar straightened to his full height, towering over her like a living mountain. "Then think about this, human." His clawed hand moved faster than Katie could dodge. The backhand caught her across the left side of her face with enough force to lift her off her feet. She flew sideways and crashed into the corridor wall, her tool bag spilling its contents across the deck. Katie hit the wall hard and slid down to the floor. Stars exploded across her vision, and she could taste blood in her mouth. Her left cheek felt like it was on fire, and her ear was ringing from the impact. The corridor fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed muted. Every alien in the crowd stared at the small human crumpled against the wall. Vexitar looked down at his clawed hand, satisfied with his work. "That is what happens when inferior species forget their place," he announced to the crowd. Jake Collins finally broke through the press of bodies, his face dark with fury. He dropped to one knee beside Katie, checking her injuries with practiced efficiency. Blood was trickling from her nose, and a dark bruise was already forming on her cheek. "Katie, can you hear me?" he asked softly. She nodded weakly, using the wall to support herself as she tried to sit up. The tools from her bag were scattered everywhere, gleaming under the corridor lights. Jake helped her to her feet, his arm supporting her weight. He looked at Vexitar with barely controlled rage, but he didn't make any threatening moves. Instead, he spoke quietly to Katie, asking about her condition and checking for serious injuries. The crowd expected the humans to back down now. This was how these confrontations always ended, with the weaker species accepting their place and retreating. Some aliens were already losing interest and starting to disperse. Vexitar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the corridor walls. "See how easily they break? This is why humans will never be our equals." He turned away from Katie and Jake, dismissing them completely. The other Corvani followed his lead, already discussing other matters as if nothing important had happened. But Katie was watching Vexitar carefully, even as Jake helped steady her. She wiped blood from her nose with the back of her hand and started counting silently in her head. 1, 2, 3. The alien had no idea what was coming. Katie continued counting silently as Jake helped her stand. Her cheek throbbed where Vexitar had hit her, but she ignored the pain. She had expected this moment, planned for it even. Everything was going exactly as she had calculated. 10, 11, 12. Vexitar was walking away with the other Corvani, laughing about the weak human who couldn't even defend herself. The crowd was starting to break up, many aliens shaking their heads in disappointment. They had hoped for more of a fight, but it had ended the way these things always did. Jake was examining Katie's face, checking the bruise that was spreading across her cheek. "We need to get you to the medical bay," he said quietly. "That was a hard hit." "I'm okay," Katie whispered back. She was watching Vexitar carefully, waiting for the first signs. "Just help me pick up my tools. 20, 21, 22. They knelt together and started gathering the scattered equipment: wrenches, scanners, calibration devices, and several small containers that had spilled their contents across the deck. Katie collected each item carefully, making sure nothing was left behind. "Why didn't you fight back?" Jake asked under his breath. "You could have at least tried to dodge." Katie looked up at him with blood still on her lip. "Because this way is better," she said simply. 30, 31, 32. Vexitar had reached the central lift area where the other Corvani officials were waiting. He was telling them about his encounter with the stupid human, gesturing with the same clawed hand he had used to strike Katie. His companions clicked their mandibles in approval. "The trade negotiations will be simple," Vexitar was saying loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The humans have no backbone, no strength, no will to fight. We can dictate whatever terms we want. 35, 36, 37. Vexitar, stopped talking mid-sentence. His hand went to his throat and he made a strange choking sound. The other Corvani looked at him with concern as he staggered slightly. "Are you all right?" one of them asked in their clicking language. Vextar tried to answer, but only a rasp came out. He looked down at his clawed hand, the one he had used to hit Katie. The polished surface of his claw was starting to change color, taking on a dull, grayish tint. Katie stood up slowly, her tools now secured in her bag. She was still leaning against Jake for support, but her eyes were fixed on Vextar with intense focus. 40, 41, 42. The big Corvani stumbled backward, his breathing becoming labored. His companions crowded around him, their voices rising in alarm. Other aliens in the corridor stopped to stare as Vextar began to sway on his feet. "What's happening to him?" Jake whispered. "He's learning something new about humans," Katie replied quietly. Vextar's legs gave out suddenly and he crashed to the deck with a sound like falling metal. His massive body convulsed as his respiratory system began to fail. The other Corvani were shouting now, calling for medical assistance and demanding to know what was wrong. 50, 51, 52. Station security officers came running from all directions, led by Commander Lisa Ward. She was a stern woman, in her 40s, who had been dealing with interspecies incidents for years. Behind her came Dr. Amy Foster, the station's chief medical officer, carrying an emergency medical kit. The crowd pressed closer, trying to see what was happening to the powerful Corvani official. Vextar was lying on his back now, his breathing shallow and irregular. His dark eyes were wide with fear and confusion. "Move back. Give him room," Dr. Foster ordered as she knelt beside Vextar. She pulled out a medical scanner and began taking readings of his vital signs. The Corvani delegation gathered around their fallen comrade, clicking frantically in their native language. Their translator devices were having trouble keeping up with their rapid speech, but Katie could make out words like poison and attack and humans. One of the Corvani officials, a female named Kex Ara, spun around to face Commander Ward. "What have you done to him?" she demanded. "This is an act of war." "Nobody has done anything," Commander Ward replied calmly. "We're trying to help him." Dr. Foster looked up from her scanner with a puzzled expression. "His nervous system is shutting down," she announced. "It looks like some kind of toxin, but I've never seen anything like this before." Katie took a step forward, still supported by Jake's arm. Every alien in the corridor turned to look at her, including the angry Corvani delegation. "I can explain what's happening," she said in a clear voice that carried across the suddenly quiet space. Commander Ward raised an eyebrow. "Katie, what do you know about this?" "Vextar is experiencing acute Corvani nervous system toxicity," Katie said, her voice steady despite the blood on her face. "It's caused by exposure to a biocompatible industrial compound that I was working with in the maintenance tunnels." The crowd stirred uneasily. Dr. Foster looked up from her patient with sharp interest. "What kind of compound?" "It's a new metal treatment solution we've been testing," Katie explained. "Completely harmless to humans because of our unique liver chemistry, but extremely toxic to Corvani physiology when absorbed through skin contact." Jake stared at her in amazement. "Katie, what are you saying?" She turned to look at him, and despite her bruised face, there was something almost like a smile in her eyes. "I'm saying that when Vextar hit me, the compound transferred from my skin to his claw. It entered his bloodstream and is now attacking his nervous system." The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien in the corridor was staring at Katie with a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. "You're telling us this was deliberate?" Commander Ward asked carefully. "The compound was on my hands and face because I had been working in the chemical storage areas," Katie said. "Standard maintenance procedure requires protective gear, but humans can handle most industrial chemicals safely without it. It's one of the advantages of evolving on a world where everything was trying to kill us." Dr. Foster was scanning Vextar again, her expression growing more concerned. "His condition is deteriorating rapidly. Do you have an antidote for this compound?" Katie nodded. "Of course, we always prepare neutralizing agents when working with potentially hazardous materials." It's basic safety protocol. Then give it to him, Kexara shouted. Save him now. I will, Katie said calmly. But first, I want everyone here to understand something important about humans. She stepped away from Jake's supporting arm and stood on her own. Despite the pain in her face, her voice carried clearly across the silent corridor. You all think we're weak because we're small and soft compared to you. You think we're stupid because we're new to galactic society. You think we're helpless because we don't have claws or armor or natural weapons. Vextar made a strangled sound from the floor, his breathing becoming more labored by the second. But you're wrong about us, Katie continued. We survived on the most dangerous planet in this sector of the galaxy. We learned to be prepared for everything, to plan for every possibility, to turn our enemies' strengths against them. She reached into her tool bag and pulled out a small vial filled with clear liquid. We learned that the best way to win a fight is to never let your opponent know they're in one until it's too late. Dr. Foster held out her hand for the antidote. Give me that now. Katie handed over the vial without hesitation. The antidote will work quickly. He'll be fully recovered in about 10 minutes. But he'll remember this experience for the rest of his life. As Dr. Foster administered the antidote to Vextar, Katie turned to address the crowd of aliens who were watching in stunned silence. Tomorrow's trade negotiations just became a lot more interesting, she said, because now you know that humans aren't as helpless as we look. We're patient, we're smart, and we're always 3 steps ahead of anyone who tries to hurt us. Jake was looking at her with something like awe. Katie, you could have killed him. But I didn't, she replied. Because humans know the difference between teaching a lesson and committing murder. That's what makes us dangerous. We choose exactly how much force to use, and we never use more than necessary. Vextar's breathing began to improve as the antidote took effect. Color was returning to his claws and his eyes were focusing again. But the fear in those eyes remained as he looked up at the small human girl who had brought him to his knees without lifting a finger in violence. The corridor was still completely silent as every alien present absorbed the implications of what they had just witnessed. The medical bay was quiet except for the steady beeping of monitoring equipment. Vextar lay on an examination table that had been specially reinforced to handle his massive weight. Dr. Amy Foster moved around him with practiced efficiency, checking his vital signs and making notes on her tablet. Katie sat on a nearby chair, holding an ice pack against her bruised cheek. Jake stood beside her, still looking amazed by what had happened in the corridor. Commander Lisa Ward paced back and forth near the door, her expression serious as she spoke quietly into her communication device. His nervous system is completely stable now, Dr. Foster announced. The antidote worked perfectly. There won't be any lasting damage. Vextar tried to sit up, but his movements were still slow and unsteady. His dark eyes found Katie across the room, and she could see a mixture of fear and confusion in them. The proud Corvani official who had struck her down was gone, replaced by someone who had just learned how close he had come to dying. How? He asked in a weak voice. How did you know this would happen? Katie adjusted the ice pack and looked at him calmly. Because I planned it, she said simply. I've been watching you and your delegation since you arrived. I knew you would eventually try to humiliate a human in public. It's what bullies like you always do. Commander Ward finished her conversation and walked over to join them. Katie, I need you to explain exactly what happened. The Corvani delegation is demanding a full investigation. It's simple, Katie replied. I've been working with a new industrial compound for the past 3 weeks. It's designed to treat metal surfaces and prevent corrosion in the station's framework. Completely safe for humans to handle. But I discovered it has unexpected effects on other species. Dr. Foster looked up from her tablet. How did you discover that? Accident at first, Katie said. A small spill in the maintenance tunnels, 2 weeks ago. A maintenance robot with Corvani-manufactured components stopped working after it came into contact with the substance. When I analyzed what happened, I realized the compound interferes with the specific type of neural pathways found in Corvani biology. Vextar made a growling sound deep in his throat. You used me as a test subject. No, Katie corrected. I prepared for the possibility that you might attack me. When you did, the compound did exactly what I knew it would do. Commander Ward crossed her arms. Are you telling me you deliberately put yourself in danger? I calculated the risk, Katie said. Vexitar has been making increasingly aggressive comments about humans since he arrived. He was building up to a physical confrontation, and I wanted to be ready when it happened. Jake shook his head in disbelief. Katie, you could have been seriously hurt. What if he had hit you harder? Then I would have been seriously hurt, she replied matter-of-factly. But the lesson would have been even more effective. Sometimes you have to take risks to protect your people. Dr. Foster was studying her scanner readings again. The compound you used, how long does it remain active on human skin? About 6 hours under normal conditions, Katie answered. I applied it to my hands and face this morning before starting my maintenance shift. I knew there was a good chance I would encounter Vextar or one of his associates today. You planned this entire scenario, Commander Ward said slowly. The bumping into him in the corridor, the argument, everything. Katie nodded. The corridor is always crowded during shift change. I knew if I timed it right, there would be plenty of witnesses. Vextar couldn't resist the opportunity to make an example of a human in front of a large audience. Vextar struggled to sit up straighter on the examination table. His voice was stronger now, but there was still a tremor in it. You could have killed me. But I didn't, Katie said. I used exactly the right amount of compound to incapacitate you temporarily without causing permanent harm. That's the difference between humans and species like yours. We know how to control our responses. The medical bay door opened, and several more Corvani officials entered. Kexara led the group, her mandibles clicking rapidly with agitation. Behind her came other members of the trade delegation, all looking angry and concerned. How is he? Kexara demanded, rushing to Vextar's side. He'll be fine, Dr. Foster assured her. Complete recovery within the hour. Kexara spun to face Katie, her claws extended in a threatening gesture. You attacked our delegation leader without provocation. This is an act of aggression against the Corvani Republic. Actually, Commander Ward interjected, your delegation leader struck one of our citizens first. We have dozens of witnesses who saw him assault Katie unprovoked. She deliberately contaminated herself with poison, another Corvani official protested. This was a premeditated attack. Katie stood up slowly, setting aside the ice pack. Despite her bruised face, her voice was steady and clear. I protected myself using available resources and superior planning. If that's illegal, then so is hitting someone smaller than you. You used chemical weapons, Kexara accused. I used an industrial cleaning compound, Katie corrected. The same substance I use every day to maintain this station. The fact that it affects your biology differently than mine isn't my fault. Dr. Foster cleared her throat. If I may interrupt, I've been analyzing the compound Katie used. It's completely non-toxic to 17 different species currently represented on this station. The Corvani sensitivity appears to be a unique biological quirk, a quirk that she knew about and exploited, Vextar said, finally managing to sit up fully. Yes, Katie agreed. Just like you knew about human size and strength compared to yours, and you exploited that knowledge when you hit me. The difference is that I was smarter about it. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed her words. Commander Ward walked over to stand beside Katie, a gesture of support that wasn't lost on the Corvani delegation. The trade negotiations are scheduled to begin in 12 hours, Commander Ward said. I suggest we all take time to consider what happened here today and what it means for our discussions. Kexara looked around the room, her eyes moving from Katie to Vextar to the other humans present. You're saying that this small human outmaneuvered our most experienced negotiator? I'm saying that humans are more dangerous than you thought, Katie replied. We don't win fights by being stronger or bigger. We win by being smarter and more prepared. One of the other Corvani officials, an older male named Thexvar, stepped forward. He had been quiet until now, but Katie could see intelligence in his eyes that was different from Vextar's crude aggression. Tell me, young human, he said carefully, what would have happened if we had not provided medical attention immediately? Katie met his gaze without flinching. Vextar would have died within approximately 20 minutes. His nervous system would have shut down completely, and there would have been nothing anyone could do to save him. The admission sent a chill through the room. Even Dr. Foster looked shocked by the casual way Katie delivered this information. "But you had the antidote ready," Thexvar continued. "Of course," Katie said. "I'm not a murderer. I wanted to teach a lesson, not commit genocide. And if we had refused to listen to your lesson? If we had simply taken you prisoner or killed you in revenge?" Katie smiled for the first time since the incident began. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then Jake here would have activated the emergency protocol that I prepared before coming to work today. Every human on this station has been exposed to the same compound I used. Anyone who attacks us will experience the same fate as Vextar." Jake's eyes widened. "Katie, you didn't." "I did," she confirmed. 47 human engineers, technicians, and maintenance workers, all carrying enough compound to incapacitate a Corvani with casual contact, all with instructions to defend themselves if threatened. The Corvani delegation exchanged alarmed glances. Kexara took a step backward. "You've turned your entire species into walking weapons." "We've always been walking weapons," Katie corrected. "We just usually choose not to use that fact. But when someone threatens us, when someone tries to make us look weak in front of the entire galaxy, we respond appropriately." Commander Ward was staring at Katie with a mixture of admiration and concern. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the moment the Corvani delegation was announced," Katie answered. "I knew they would try to undermine human credibility before the negotiations. I prepared accordingly." Vextar slowly got to his feet, his legs still unsteady but supporting his weight. He looked down at Katie with new respect mixed with wariness. "You are not what you appear to be." "None of us are," Katie replied. "That's what makes humans dangerous. We look harmless, but we're always thinking 3 steps ahead. We prepare for every possibility, and we never forget a slight." She picked up her tool bag and slung it over her shoulder. "The trade negotiations start tomorrow morning. I suggest you prepare better strategies than trying to intimidate us with physical violence." As Katie walked toward the door, every alien in the room watched her go. The small human maintenance worker had just changed the entire dynamic of interspecies relations on the station. "One more thing," she said, pausing at the doorway. "The compound wears off human skin in about 6 hours, but I can reapply it any time I want. So can every other human on this station." The main conference room on Nexus 7 had never seen a gathering quite like this one. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the massive circular table, but all eyes were focused on the 2 groups that mattered most today. The boy human delegation sat on one side, led by Ambassador Carol Martinez, a seasoned diplomat with silver hair and sharp eyes. Across from them, the Corvani delegation clustered around Thexvar, who had taken over negotiations after Vextar's humiliating defeat. Katie Moore sat in the observer section behind the human delegation, her bruised face a visible reminder of yesterday's events. The purple and black marks on her cheek had darkened overnight, making her look even smaller and more fragile than usual. But every alien in the room kept glancing at her nervously, as if she might suddenly produce another deadly surprise. "Ambassador," Martinez opened the proceedings with a calm smile. "I believe we all understand why we're here today. The Corvani Republic has requested expanded trade access to human technology and markets. Let's discuss what that might look like." Thexvar's mandibles clicked softly as he considered his words. The elderly Corvani was far more careful than Vextar had been, and Katie could see the intelligence in his approach. He understood that the situation had changed dramatically since yesterday. "The Corvani Republic acknowledges that certain assumptions about human capabilities may have been incorrect," Thexvar said carefully. "We are prepared to negotiate as equals." "That's generous of you," Ambassador Martinez replied with just a hint of sarcasm. "Given that yesterday your delegation seemed to consider us inferior in every way." A Zalathi representative leaned forward with interest. The tall, blue-skinned aliens had been watching the humans with new respect since word of the incident spread throughout the station. "If I may ask, Are all humans capable of what Miss Moore demonstrated yesterday? Katie stood up from her seat in the observer section. Ambassador Martinez nodded for her to speak, having discussed this moment in advance. Every human on this station received basic training in defensive chemistry before the Corvani delegation arrived, Katie said clearly. It's a standard precaution when dealing with potentially hostile species. The room stirred uneasily. Several alien delegates exchanged worried glances. They were beginning to understand that the incident with Vextar hadn't been a lucky accident or a one-time preparation. Are you saying humans routinely prepare chemical weapons when meeting new species? Asked a Moxari representative, his fur bristling with concern. We prepare appropriate defenses based on threat assessment, Katie corrected. The Corvani have a documented history of using physical intimidation in negotiations. We planned accordingly. Thexvar's claws tapped against the table surface. You researched us before we arrived. Of course we did, Ambassador Martinez said. Just as you researched us. The difference is that your research led you to conclude we were weak and easily intimidated. Our research led us to develop effective countermeasures. A Sectar delegate hissed softly through his forked tongue. What other countermeasures have humans developed? Katie smiled, and the expression made several aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. That would depend on which species we're dealing with. Every race has different biological vulnerabilities. Humans are very good at identifying and exploiting weaknesses. This sounds like a threat, complained a representative from the insectoid Kretok delegation. It's information, Ambassador Martinez replied smoothly. Just like the information that Corvani claws can easily tear through human skin, or that Salathi can survive in atmospheres that would kill us in minutes. We all have strengths and weaknesses. The question is whether we use that knowledge for cooperation or conflict. Thexvar leaned back in his chair, studying the human delegation with new eyes. You're saying that humans have been analyzing all of us. Since the day we joined the galactic community, Katie confirmed, it's what we do. We observe, we analyze, we prepare. It's how we survived long enough to reach the stars. Dr. Amy Foster, who had been invited to provide technical testimony, stood up from the medical section. If I may add some context, the compound Miss Moore used yesterday is completely harmless to most species represented in this room. The Corvani sensitivity is actually quite rare. But you have other compounds for other species, Thexvar stated. It wasn't a question. We have industrial chemicals that affect different biologies in different ways, Dr. Foster admitted. Most are cleaning solutions, metal treatments, or atmospheric processors. We didn't design them as weapons, but we're aware of their potential effects. A Corvani official who had remained silent until now suddenly spoke up. This is Kexara. I demand to know what protections humans have prepared against our species specifically. Katie looked at Ambassador Martinez, who nodded permission to continue. The compound I used yesterday was the mildest option available. We have 17 different substances that affect Corvani nervous systems. Most would cause permanent damage or death. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background hum of the station's life support seemed muted as every alien in the room absorbed this information. 17, Vextar repeated from his position behind Thexvar. His voice was still weak from yesterday's experience, but the fear in it was unmistakable. Chemical warfare is prohibited under galactic law, protested the Zalathi representative. Using household cleaning supplies for maintenance work is not chemical warfare, Ambassador Martinez replied calmly. The fact that these substances have unintended effects on certain species is not our responsibility. Katie stepped forward again. May I share something that might help everyone understand human thinking? The room waited in tense silence as she moved closer to the main table. Despite her small size and obvious injuries, she commanded everyone's attention completely. Humans don't want to hurt anyone, she said simply. Yesterday, I could have killed Vextar easily. Instead, I chose the one compound that would incapacitate him temporarily without permanent harm. That choice tells you everything you need to know about how humans really think. You chose mercy. Thexvar said slowly. I chose the appropriate response, Katie corrected. Vextar hit me to demonstrate Corvani's superiority and human weakness. I responded by demonstrating human intelligence and preparation. The lesson was delivered without unnecessary cruelty. She looked around the room, making eye contact with representatives from every species present. Humans could have weaponized these discoveries years ago. We could have used them to dominate other species or eliminate threats. Instead, we kept them as defensive options while pursuing peaceful cooperation. But now you're revealing them as a threat, Kexara accused. No, Katie said firmly. I'm revealing them as insurance. Every species in this galaxy has advantages over humans. You're stronger, faster, more resilient, better adapted to hostile environments. But we have one advantage that trumps all of yours. Which is? Asked the Moxari delegate. We think further ahead than you do, Katie replied. While you were planning to intimidate us in negotiations, we were preparing for every possible scenario. While you assumed we were weak because we look fragile, we were analyzing your weaknesses and developing appropriate responses. Ambassador Martinez stood up and placed a supportive hand on Katie's shoulder. Miss Moore has demonstrated something important about human nature. We prefer cooperation to conflict, but we're always prepared for both. The trade negotiations can proceed in one of two ways, the ambassador continued. We can work together as equals, sharing technology and resources for mutual benefit, or you can continue to view humans as inferior and try to exploit what you perceive as weakness. And if we choose the second option? Thexvar asked carefully. Katie's smile returned, cold and calculating. Then you'll discover that humans are much more dangerous than we appear, and by the time you realize your mistake, it will be too late to change course. The room fell silent again as every alien delegate considered their options. The small human maintenance worker had just redefined the entire balance of power in galactic politics. I believe, Thexvar said finally, that the Corvani Republic would prefer to negotiate with humans as respected equals. Excellent choice, Ambassador Martinez replied warmly. Now, let's discuss technology sharing agreements that benefit everyone involved. As the formal negotiations began, Katie returned to her seat in the observer section. Jake Collins leaned over to whisper in her ear. Do we really have 17 different compounds that affect Corvani biology? Katie whispered back with a slight grin. Actually, we have 23. I thought 17 sounded less threatening. The trade talks proceeded smoothly from that point forward, with every species treating the humans with new respect and caution. They had learned something important about humanity that day. Humans were not the weakest species in the galaxy. They were potentially the most dangerous one, and the fact that they chose restraint over destruction made them the most valuable allies anyone could hope to have. In the end, that was the most human trait of all.